Hello, this is Soundout here, and today we're doing another disc discussion with the format wars between the DVD, Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, and SD Blu-ray. Let's take a look and discuss each of these, as well as comparing and contrasting what are the best of each format.
It's morphin' time!
So before we begin, I feel like some context is important when we're discussing these different formats of releases, as not everybody may be on the same page as to information, so I want to put out some baseline stuff. First of all, DVD. It's a format that began in the late 90s and became popular in the 2000s. It is an SD video format, so a DVD can contain SD footage up to 480p. That is the maximum quality you're going to get out of a DVD, and they are typically been used for shows and movies up until around 2006 or 2007 at the introduction of Blu-ray. Now, Blu-ray is an HD disc format that allows everything up to 1080p HD and is, in fact, a higher video quality in addition to being a larger disc size. And this comes into play later. 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray is a recent format. It's been around about 5 years now, and this is a step beyond Blu-ray. They're still coded as Blu-ray discs, but require specific technology to work. For example, you need a 4K TV, a 4K Blu-ray player, a 4K HDMI cable, and then of course your 4K disc. This is kind of the higher end of home video experiences, and it's not for everybody, but we'll talk about what I love about 4K when we get to that segment. And then standard definition Blu-ray is a format that's been popular in the anime industry, specifically with Discotek Media making it sort of a thing, and that is taking standard definition video content that would normally appear on a DVD, but putting it on the larger size discs of a Blu-ray. So for example, this one Sonic the Hedgehog set is 65 episodes across 2 Blu-rays, as opposed to say something like 8 or 9 DVD discs. And this, I think, is the future of standard definition video on disc. But let's go into these. Let's talk about some good and bad. We're going to kind of spend less time on DVD and Blu-ray because I think most people are familiar with those. Let's talk about 4K and SD Blu-ray a little further in this video. So starting off with DVD, like I said, most people are familiar by this point what a DVD is. It was the upgrade to VHS. VHS, of course, being a tape-based format. This was the first real disc-based format. And an example of DVD done well would be this He-Man and the Masters of the Universe box set. This is the entire 130 episodes of the original Filmation He-Man, plus some bonus features. And it's on a heck of a lot of discs. It's a lot of DVDs. But the quality here is pretty good. The show itself is not like a hi-fi, super detailed, large video size type of show. So having it on DVD is fine. It looks good. It has everything here. It even has the crossover features with She-Ra, as well as some additional bonus features. And these 2 discs are repeated on the She-Ra set that you can see back there. Now, this is a modern DVD set. And, I talk about how DVD is sort of outdated at this point, and we'll get into that when we talk about SD Blu-ray. But this is fine. This is totally serviceable, and I like that it's in a very slim pack case. But something like this, a show from 1982 on DVD, totally fine. I'm totally cool with that. What I'm not cool with is the 2002 He-Man show, which probably could be in HD, only being on 4 discs and being horribly compressed because it is a newer show with larger video file sizes just due to the amount of content on them. So that's like a good example, bad example, just the same franchise, but I have another one, and that would be Star Wars Resistance. This was a CG animated show, 3D animated show, done and recorded and output and broadcast in HD, and yet it's stuck as DVD only. And in fact, this was the last physical release of a Star Wars TV show. Actually, I think the last physical release period for Star Wars. We haven't gotten literally nothing since. This is a DVD set for the first season of Resistance. And yes, I did say the last because I never did season 2. And here's the thing. That's only 4 discs for 21 episodes. It's not bad, but for a modern show like this, it should be so much better, especially when the previous show, Star Wars Rebels, was on Blu-ray. And, I mean, there's been a lot of talk as if Resistance was, essentially, doomed to fail because Disney just didn't put the heart behind it, and they really didn't. They didn't market this show whatsoever. They essentially threw it out there, and then it just kind of flopped and was never seen again after its second season. It had its own stories, but I think it was just kind of a shame that they went from, oh hey, all of Rebels came out in Blu-ray, to Resistance is DVD only, and they didn't even bother getting the second half of the show out there. Now, Blu-ray has been around long enough, and there's a whole can of worms on some of the editions of Blu-ray that we've gotten. I want to talk about just the way that Blu-ray is an upgrade. For example, Superman the Complete Animated Series here. It's a very nice package. It has all of the episodes on here. It has a lot of the bonus features from the previous, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. But this is a full HD remaster of the show, and it looks really good. So it is definitely an upgrade from the old DVD sets. Unfortunately, sometimes with Blu-ray, we did not get everything carried forward for various reasons. For example, there's some missing audio commentaries from this that were on the DVD sets, and that just happens from time to time. But I will say another big benefit of Blu-ray is the lower disc counts, this being a 6-disc Blu-ray, and this is actually 6 discs, but because of the way that DVDs are packaged, these 3 volumes take up a lot more room than this one Blu-ray. So Blu-ray does have its advantages in size scaling, but I will say that compared to the DVD, this Blu-ray cover is nice, but these are very flavorful, even if they completely changed the logo on the 3rd volume, and that's bugged me for a long time. I mean, look at that. It says Volume O&E, Volume TWO, and then Vol 3. Consistency is a whole different video series I already did, but there is a size benefit to Blu-ray in addition to the upgraded quality. So let's talk about 4K and where I was really convinced that I wanted to continue in this format. And that was because I had 4K discs. I had a lot of steelbooks that had 4K discs as bonuses. That's just the way they sold the steelbooks at that point. But I hadn't really dived into 4K completely. Had a 4K TV, but not a 4K Blu-ray player. But there was a sale on 4K Blu-ray players, and decided to get a nice Sony one and pick up the Batman movies because I was hearing so many good things about these. And for me, I had the Batman anthology box set. This is the DVD. I had the previous single DVDs, and I had a couple of the Blu-rays. I had Batman and Batman Returns on Steelbook. So this was like my opportunity to kind of upgrade my Batman collection. And what was really amazing about these was the fact that this is a film from 1989, but it looks so fresh. And I mean in that, this is a new remaster, which what's nice about this too is that the new remasters are also on the Blu-ray discs included, so you do get an upgrade just across the board. But with this movie in particular, we had the depth and detail of a film-like experience because the nature of film, whether it be 35 millimeter or any other size, it has a lot of depth and detail due to the nature of it because you're projecting light behind an image and projecting that onto a movie theater screen. So a lot of these movies really haven't been able to replicate the theater-like experience in the modern day on disc. But that is where 4K can come in because 4K is not so much about having a higher resolution as much as it's having the potential for color depth and detail depth that wasn't previously there. So watching Batman was like watching it new for the first time. It was like watching it in a theater but on a TV. And it was really amazing, especially Batman Returns, which is a movie I've studied and written papers for in high school, even as part of a film literacy class. I know this movie inside and out. I felt like there was nothing more to learn about it, but watching it on the 4K release, there was all these little details and all this extra color depth. And it's the thing that's about it's hard to describe and it's hard to see in screenshots because screenshots are compressed, is that when you're watching it and the way that things move in motion is just incredible. Same for Batman Forever. This is not necessarily like as high art film, but in a lot of ways, the neon of Gotham City sort of got washed out on the DVD version, but seeing it on the 4K, it kind of all came together. And even Batman and Robin, which has, been arguably the worst of the group, even though I still enjoy watching it, this one actually has a lot of just color depth to it that was actually amazing. And so after experiencing these movies on 4K, I really started paying attention to the format, but there's not all of them are good, mind you. Keep in mind that bonus features are going to be the biggest things lost on 4Ks because a lot of these 4K discs will not have bonus features on them. Due to 4Ks being region-free, they will be typically made for multiple countries and they'll have multiple certifications in them, so they can't always include all the bonus features. But that's why they're typically 4K and Blu-ray combo packs. But sometimes that Blu-ray doesn't have enough space after putting a movie on it, and that's where some things get lost. In the case of Batman, this wasn't a problem. In the case of others, however. So another example of an upgrade but also a downgrade is Back to the Future. And don't get me wrong, I want to put this out up front. This Back to the Future 4K set is amazing. And the reason why 4K, and we're going to talk about bad 4K in a minute. Good 4K is when you have the original creative team involved in some way. Just, it always works out better because they know what it's supposed to look like. I have this awesome Steelbook set with all 3 movies. It's got a ton of bonus features. It's got practically everything that was on the Blu-ray, which is really good. Now, the only downside to the Back to the Future 35th anniversary set is the 30th anniversary collection had this really cool flux capacitor box. This is also why I keep every version at this point. There is one thing that this had that that one didn't. First of all, this one came in a book-style packaging, which I'm not a huge fan of this. It's got to be done very, very well, or else the disc will get stuck in the glue, which is why I'm checking these here. So this stuff is for the most part, I think, in the 4K. It's that this set also came with this, and this is. Again, this is where I've noticed where 4K is taking a little bit more of a minimalist approach sometimes. The complete animated series was included in the 30th anniversary set. It's a really big bonus. I will be honest, I actually haven't watched this, but I like having it. And then also adding to that, they included a abridged version of the Back to the Future visual history book. And this is also very nice. Now, there are sets like the recent Ghostbusters Ultimate set, which I recently did a unboxing of. And, that has stuff like books and additional extras. But a lot of the 4K sets, like here's a good example. This was 2015. This was 2020. As you can see, not as many physical bonuses carried forward. And there was a Back to the Future non-steelbook, and it was more like that book packaging that was there. So, I end up keeping both versions of this. This is the version of the movies I'll watch, but this has the other bonuses I want to keep. So, one of the downsides to 4K is that sometimes you're going to end up holding on to both copies of a movie. It's not a disc discussion if I don't mention Star Trek at some point, because it's like one of the best franchises on physical disc that's ever existed. With the Star Trek 4Ks, I'm kind of in a weird boat. This Star Trek Motion Picture Collection, I don't like looking at this anymore because these 4Ks are such an upgrade just from the color spectrums to the details and everything. But this has 6 movies, this only has 4. So we're still waiting to see how the next Star Trek 4K set will be. Will it be 5, 6 in Generations? Will it just be 5 and 6 in a bonus disc? Who knows? But this, I kind of wish it was 6 and 4 like they did the Blu-ray releases. But this also features, so this has 2 movies that aren't here, so I still have to hold on to it, but this Captain Summit disc, this could be, I'm putting this down for the record. Currently, the Captain Summit is a very important bonus disc with this collection and its subsequent re-releases. And I'm hoping it makes it over to the 4K, because the rest of the bonus features did. I would never have to look at this thing again if the 4Ks could have it. So we'll see what happens. There is another upgrade in addition to that, is that the 4K collection includes the director's edition of Wrath of Khan, whereas this collection only contained the theatrical, which is a big benefit. Now, the director's edition of Motion Picture is coming later because it's being a whole different project. It's going to be kind of amazing. I hope to talk about that later this year when that happens. But essentially, sometimes you can upgrade to 4K and then not need the Blu-ray anymore, and I'm hoping this is one of those cases because I would like that. All right, let's tear into some terrible 4K because there certainly is a bunch of it out there. I don't own a lot of bad 4K because I do my research. With 4K, typically the way I approach it is if it's on film and it has the original creators involved, I will buy it day one. No problem. If it was a digitally released film, I'm going to wait for reviews. If it was not involved with the original creators, I'm going to wait. If it's a company that's a little dubious, I'm probably going to wait. Because this happened to me. So I was going all in 4K after the Batman experience. I was like, oh man, 4K is great. And I was checking some of the discs I had. 4Ks like Wonder Woman were a slight upgrade. And that's typically the case with modern films. But I was like, oh, let me get some of these, film stock movies. Don't ever buy this. Let me just tell you, this was when I was like, oh no, I need to stop and do some research. Terminator 2 Judgment Day, released by Studio Canal and Lionsgate on 4K, is not the original film negative remastered. It's the 3D edition of the movie slapped onto a 4K disc and called a 4K. It even says this film is modified to be the 3D version, except it's not a 3D version. I don't know what the hell this was, and the fact they recently re-released this in a steelbook and said it was a new transfer signed off by James Cameron, when it Well, I mean, it was signed off on James Cameron when they did the 3D edition, but it's not. So don't ever buy Terminator 2 on 4K. Get it on Blu-ray. I only had it on DVD, and honestly, that's a better presentation than this, because taking a 3D movie, un-3D'ing it, and then putting it on a 4K disc just made everything mushy, washed out, just completely like, what the actual hell. I'm glad I only paid $10 for it, but don't buy that on 4K, and do your research. The best places to find out if a 4K transfer was done right or done wrong, I'm going to recommend the Digital Bits and Blu-ray.com. These are my two favorite websites to go look for. I always compare and contrast the reviews, and I don't just look at the scores, I look and read what they see and what they notice, because everyone's preferences are a little different, and everyone's setups are a little different. I guess another thing to add to with 4K is it's not just having the player, the TV, and the HDMI cable, it's also adjusting your TV settings to get that natural film look to it, and that's going to be a little different for everybody because everybody has different eyes. But yeah, this one sucks. So Star Wars Resistance was already on this, but we're going to talk another Star Wars thing, and that's the movies. You might be wondering why you carrying around the old Lucasfilm 20th Century Fox Blu-ray release that has some weird color grading. This is the best physical release of these movies. It's not good. It's not great. It's serviceable. But it's better than the 4Ks because I didn't pick up the 4Ks for Star Wars. I was looking forward to them, but for whatever reason, Lucasfilm and Disney Home Video, in their infinite wisdom, remastered all 6 movies, all the first 6 movies on 4K. They did wonderfully, hey, look, we restored them as best we can. Here it is with a full HDR presentation, and then locked it to Disney Plus and the digital codes. The actual physical discs don't have the HDR, which, hey, let's talk about HDR. HDR is high dynamic range. It's similar to something called Dolby Vision, which Dolby Vision's kind of like a step above. And this gets us really into technical stuff here, but the basics of it is that if you have a 4K without HDR or Dolby Vision, why'd you make a 4K? Because you're not really getting a full picture experience. You need that high dynamic range of color and depth and detail, or that Dolby Vision, which is just a step beyond. The Star Wars 4Ks didn't have that. The only one that actually looks good, Revenge of the Sith. Somehow, this movie, even though it was done in 2005, turned out the best. And I'll tell you why Star Wars is a just giant mess. I'll try to be concise, but essentially, with the prequel movies, a lot of their digital set work and digital creature work was not really meant to be seen in 4K. It was done for 1080p at most. It was just early 2000s. That was kind of the format. So it doesn't look great when you upscale it to 4K because they're not going to go back and re-render all those digital assets into 4K. And that's essentially where the problem comes in with a lot of science fiction films that have digital effects. With Revenge of the Sith, for whatever reason, in 2005, apparently they pre-prepped this thing to be in 4K. George Lucas is always ahead of his time because this one looks absolutely fantastic. All of the CG digital elements blend really well with the film stock elements, and it looks like a seamless presentation. It looks fantastic. It's why I own this one and not any of the others. The original trilogy is a giant disaster because if they had released the theatrical cuts on 4K from the original camera negative, probably one of the best presentations ever. In fact, watching the 4K versions of the movies on Disney Plus, the actual parts that are the film stock look amazing. It's just all the special edition changes and added CG elements and everything that's been added since 1997 doesn't look good. Some of it was done in 97, some of it was done recently. It doesn't blend. You're using a 35mm film stock from the 1970s and mixing it with late 90s, early 2000s CGI work, and it blends together into a cacophony of just awfulness. It comes together like this. It's uncomfortable. Every time you see a special edition added feature, an extra CG element to those original films, it stands out like oil and vinegar. It doesn't work at all. Revenge of the Sith, though, presented pretty well, and I believe the recent films are also good. I just didn't feel like rebuying those on 4K, but of the original 6 Star Wars films, it was a giant mess, and yeah, honestly, I wish we could get the theatrical cuts released on 4K because that would be the best presentation of the original trilogy. But for the most part, I'm going to end up watching these movies on Disney Plus, which is probably Disney's goal all along, or I'll watch them on my old Lucasfilm Fox Blu-ray because at least there, the digital and physical elements aren't separating like elements in a test tube. It's just, this is... Star Wars needs a whole overhaul of all of its movies, but that would be way too much money to ever just do this for the sake of 4K Blu-rays, when this will satisfy most customers. But this Revenge of the Sith one's really good. That's my main point. All right, we're going to talk about animation on 4K, which is something jury's still out on this one. So when it comes to animated movies, 4Ks are nice, but I don't know if it's totally like an upgrade. Something like Akira had a whole new remaster, and that was on a film stock. So, you know, there is a bit of an upgrade there. When it comes down to modern animated films, I do end up buying them on 4K, but I don't really notice too much of an upgrade. So for example, Encanto came out recently. I got the 4K, mostly because I just, you know, I'm buying the format. I will notice that the visual quality between the 4K and the Blu-ray contained in the set isn't much different, but the audio range is much better on the 4K. So there is that, and especially with a musical, it kind of helps to have that extra audio range. But, you know, it looks good in both presentations. So I don't really know if 4K is needed for modern, you know, digitally produced animation. You know, and the same thing goes for Catwoman Hunted, which, by the way, is one of the best DC animated movies we've ever gotten. This is an incredible film. It's done by a Japanese anime studio, did the animation. It's got some great writing with Greg Weisman. There's a lot of great, you know, moments in it. It has kind of a Lupin the Third vibe to it too, which is really cool. But anyways, Catwoman Hunted is in a steelbook, as you can see here. By the way, Young Justice fans, it is tangentially connected because that's the same Cheshire. But anyways, Catwoman Hunted is a steelbook that's 4K and Blu-ray. You can't get the steelbook with just Blu-ray, so I spent the extra $5 to get the steelbook. Might as well get the 4K. And I watched it on 4K, and you know what? When it comes down to it, I don't know if digitally produced animation is going to have a physical difference on 4K versus Blu-ray. It's just going to be little minor things, so that's just kind of where I stand with that. That being said, one of my favorite anime films of all time, Robot Carnival, recently got a 4K release from Discotek Media. This was using the same transfer they had for their Blu-ray, but they, you know, upgraded it to the 4K disc. Now, this is not a combo pack, it's just the 4K. So there is some minor differences between these two. There are some gallery features that did not make it to 4K because 4K disc cannot handle galleries or something like that. That's not in the coding of the disc. So this isn't entirely the same release twice, but you know, you can almost see it in the covers. You can almost see how this is brighter, more vibrant, more detailed. I don't know if that was intentional, but if it was, that's brilliant. So this is one of those cases where you have to keep both copies because the first one has branching paths where the second one doesn't, and the 4K just doesn't have as the picture galleries, I think. But when it comes down to it, getting this on 4K is kind of amazing because no screenshot comparing these two would ever tell you anything different. But watching it with your own eyes through a TV, through a nice 4K player, it's pretty great. It's just there's an added depth of detail and an added depth of frame that you can't really notice through the Blu-ray to the 4K, having them side by side or looking at one then the other. It's an upgrade. But the tricky part with 4K is that it's hard to articulate into words. And that's just where we're at. So we talked about 4K's missing bonus features, but let's talk about another pet peeve of mine. So G.I. Joe Retaliation recently came out on 4K, and this is my favorite of the G.I. Joe movies. I actually really enjoy it. There's a lot of great stuff in it. I've talked about it before, I think. Retaliation came out on 4K, and it was very exciting because one of my favorite action sequences of all of movies is the mountain chase scene, and it looks amazing. Picture, audio, great. There was something missing, and that was the extended action cut, which also got re-released right alongside of it. This was originally an Amazon exclusive cut of the film, which was weird, but whatever. And it didn't make it to the 4K. So if you want the extended cut, which has several more minutes, it's only going to be on Blu-ray, which is a shame because, well, they didn't even include it as the Blu-ray for the companion. And this happens sometimes with alternate cuts of movies. By the way, I totally stuck the extended action cut in with the 4K. I'm a little clever like that. But anyways, this has happened a couple times now where you'll get an extended cut of a movie, but the theatrical version is the one that makes it to 4K. When the extended cut, for a lot of people, may be their preferred version of the film. You know, there's another example I can think of that is actually a bigger issue for me. So a few years back, Sony re-released the Amazing Spider-Man and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies in these really cool digibook packaging. I recently picked up the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies because I wanted them in 4K because I was doing my research, doing reviews. All right, they were shot on film, you know, that it does add a depth to the character. So you get the movie on Blu-ray, 4K, Blu-ray, 4K plus a bonus disc. And then I had picked up at the time the Tobey Maguire Blu-ray set because this included a new cut of Spider-Man 3 called the Editor's Cut, which was included on this bonus disc, which has bonus editor's cut. And so I didn't pick up the 4K at the time because I don't think actually the 4K came a few years later actually. But I picked this up and I was happy because this included not just Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, but it also contained on the disc for Spider-Man 2, it contains Spider-Man 2.1, the extended cut that adds more depth to Doc Ock's character. And then in addition to that, you had Spider-Man 3, and then like I said on the bonus disc, the editor's cut. Now there was a 4K set released at the same time they did this one, and it included Spider-Man on 4K, plus Spider-Man on Blu-ray, Spider-Man 2 on 4K, plus Spider-Man 2 on Blu-ray, and Spider-Man 3 on 4K, plus Spider-Man 3 on Blu-ray, plus the bonus disc. But the problem was that 2.1 and the editor's cut didn't get the 4K upgrade. I don't understand why, because those are the preferred versions of the movies for me. So if I was going to get a 4K, I would go for that. And then recently, Sony just put out Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3 on 4K, just the 4K discs, and I thought, hey, maybe I'll get that as a companion. Except, again, it doesn't have 2.1 or the editor's cut. So even if they are a visual upgrade, the two cuts of the two movies that I enjoy watching aren't there, so I'm sticking to this. And yeah, it's kind of a bummer. I think that, you know, if you have an extended cut, do the 4K for it while you're working on the regular. Let's talk about SD Blu-ray, standard definition on Blu-ray, which I really think was popularized by Discotek Media. They had the idea of, why don't we cut costs but not reduce quality? So for example, when it comes to SD Blu-ray, people may not totally get this, and I want to kind of explain it the best I can. Standard definition on Blu-ray is taking standard definition video but putting it on a Blu-ray disc. For example, Metabot Season 3 here, it's 39 episodes, but it's on one Blu-ray disc. 39 episodes on one disc. You can just watch it straight through. That is convenient, but some people may be concerned. Hey, isn't that reducing the quality? Don't we talk about compression when you have too few discs? Well, it's not the case here. What Discotek Media has done is they've taken shows that are in standard definition. These aren't HD shows. The masters don't exist. And, you know, sometimes you look at it and you're like, okay, well, 64 episodes, how is that on one disc? Well, it's only the English dub version, and the English dub version never was done in HD. So, yeah, it can fit on one disc. People don't realize that DVDs have a very limited capacity, whereas Blu-rays can hold about 256 gigabytes worth of data. And if properly compressed in the right ways, it'll look fantastic. This Mega Beast Investigator Just Beyond set is 46 episodes on standard definition, and it looks better than all of the Ultraman DVD-only sets that Mill Creek's done, and all of the Shout Sentai sets. Because with that extra room, and because this is an HD format hosting SD video, you actually get a quality boost. Laserion here looks great. Daltanius is an even older show. Looks pretty good. Cyborg 009. This was actually a dual audio release, which many of the SD Blu-rays are. Totally fits, 51 episodes. And you know what? Having it all on one disc means it's easily bingeable. You know, something like Bobo 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 Bo, 76 episodes. This is a very long show. This one's on 2 Blu-rays. That way it's not overtaxing one Blu-ray. You know, if this was done on DVD, 76 episodes would be 8, 9, 10, 12 discs. Sonic X. In fact, Discotek released this as 3 DVD volume sets prior, or you can now get it as 2 Blu-rays. It's very, very, very nice because, you know what? As collections of home video grow, I prefer smaller formatting. In addition to that, it just seems like with this, you know, when you can get Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog onto 2 Blu-rays, instead of, say, something like, I don't know, an 8-disc DVD set that takes up 3 times the space, why not? Why not just go for this easier format? And I think it's just market confusion. The market is getting nicher for Blu-rays, but larger companies may not want to take the plunge into what seems like a confusing format, being standard definition on Blu-ray. But Discotek isn't the only ones that have touched SD Blu-ray. But there may be another reason why companies aren't just ready to jump into standard definition on Blu-ray. Because I do have an example of a bad release. Not this one. This is Made in Japan's Votom's Complete Collection Blu-ray. This is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite mecha anime of all time, you know, when it's not a Gundam show, so it's outside of my normal parameters. This Votom's release has all 52 episodes of the TV show, 39 OVA episodes, and 6 movies in SD and HD on 9 discs. This is a really good SD Blu-ray. You got 13 episodes on one disc, it's very nicely presented, and that's the original show as a standard definition. Some of the compilation movies, standard definition, OVAs, SD, other OVAs, SD, and then 2 discs of HD content, which are the newer Votom's works. Now, unfortunately, when Made in Japan first went and did Votom's, they had an issue that looked like this. This tweet here shows on the left the screenshot of the new Votom's release, and on the right was the old one. The original one had ghosting problems, and ghosting problems comes from interlacing issues, and that happens a lot with standard definition video or non-HD video, and the video was totally fixed for the re-release, but the original release of Votom's had that ghosting issue. So while it may seem like, oh yeah, we can just take the standard definition video and just slap it on a Blu-ray disc, there may be a little bit more work done to it in order to make it really good, and that's why companies like Discotech or Nozomi or Made in Japan are more suited for that. They're niche companies, whereas larger studio labels may not want to commit the manpower to making the SD Blu-ray work. I've been watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine lately, and I have all these thick cases. Like, this is 3 seasons, and it's, 7 discs a season, and I was just thinking, like, if this was SD Blu-ray, like, the entire show would be in, like, a slim pack instead of, like, having 3 of these. Man, SD Blu-ray is a great idea, and I hope the industry starts to adopt it more, because I feel like releasing stuff on DVD nowadays is sort of pointless when you can put SD video on Blu-ray. So at the end of the day, whether it's DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, or SD Blu-ray, I'm just glad to have stuff on disc. I'm really not picky. I would prefer a lot of stuff that is DVD only to just be on SD Blu-ray for the sake of space. And I'd like, everything that was shot on film to be wonderfully recreated on 4K, but sadly it's not always a reality. But I hope this video was interesting and engaging enough to everyone out there. This is an interesting topic, especially because we're currently running 4 video formats on disc. Even back in the old days when we had VHS and Laserdisc coexisting, or VHS and Betamax warring it out, or even Blu-ray versus HD DVD, typically, the way that media has gone is that, VHS didn't get replaced by Laserdisc, but got replaced by DVD. But DVD hasn't been replaced by Blu-ray. A bunch of stuff still comes out on DVD. Blu-ray hasn't been released on 4K because, hey, not everything's going to get released on 4K. Like, legitimately, Future Robot Daltanius is getting SD Blu-ray at max. There's just no way this thing's ever going to be on 4K, or anyone would want to pay 4K prices for it. So I don't feel like these formats are ever going to, like, go away. It's like they're tied together in a way. You have niche companies doing SD Blu-ray, the bigger, high-profile stuff's getting 4K. A lot of stuff is getting Blu-ray. I mean, Disney's putting out shows on Blu-ray, and we'll talk about that in a later video. And DVD's still here. I wish we could move on from DVD, because I think having things in these 3 formats would be pretty fantastic, as opposed to still having DVD, but this is just where we're at. So let me know what your preferred format is in the comments below. I know a lot of people still love DVD, even over, Blu-ray, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. And also be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button, the notification bell, to keep up with future disc discussions on the channel. And if you haven't checked out any of my others, I'll be having a playlist at the end of the video. But on that note, check out Hero Club at hero-club.com for movie news and more. My awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.